You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us again here at Healing Voices Project. We're glad to have you back, and we're also glad to have our two guests today, and I'm really excited to talk to both of them, and I think you will be too, because I had some great conversations with each of them, and I've been looking forward to this ever since those talks we had. We have Amy Higgins, a wife and mom of two grown boys, who is the Director of Employee Wellbeing at MassMutual, involved in wellness strategy, also public speaking, and considers herself a sober student, which we'll talk a little bit about. And also a little bit about Amy's history is she's lived through alcoholism in her family, has had experiences with members of her family, and certainly this is what has inspired her to get involved with this, with the close community that we'll talk about. And so we'll dive into that a little bit with Amy and her background and what brought you to where you are now. And also Chris Rich, who is a wife and mom of three children, and whose faith and family are her top two priorities. And also another priority, a little lower than your faith and family, is you're a podcast host, and the podcast host of the Mixed Faith Relationship Podcast, and also a certified life coach at Chris Rich Coaching, which you can find at chrisrichcoaching.com. And also, Chris is a public speaker who moved from Salt Lake City about 12 years ago here to Western Mass, which is very different from Salt Lake City. So welcome to Western Mass 12 years later.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Glad to have both of you here. Thanks for coming in. One of the things that brought us here, obviously, is your involvement with the close community. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what the close community is, what it does, and why the organization exists. And then we'll get involved with your backgrounds, what brought you here, what your top concerns are. And so I'm not sure who wants to start, but Amy, you want to tell? Have you both? By the way, did you both join the close community at the same time?
No, I roped her
She recruited
in.
me.
Yeah. Oh, so you were first. Well, in that case, you get to talk about it first.
Oh, no. I should have changed that. So the close coalition or community, it's, I have to look at my notes. It's the, oh boy, I can't even remember the acronym.
Well, the acronym's okay. It's CLOSE,
Yes.
community, and the website is closecommunity.org. And it, by the way, and I was on that quite a bit last night and this morning. There is a wealth of information on that website. Everything about the parents, about teens, about what to look for. And one thing I liked is the mock bedroom.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about a little bit too.
I love that.
But I have the mission, because I think that encapsulates what we're talking about here with the Close Coalition. It's the mission of a close community is to collaboratively initiate, coordinate, and sustain prevention and intervention efforts that reduce youth substance use and abuse within the town of Longmeadow. You're not just confined to the town of Longmeadow, or are you?
Well, we have sector representatives from around Longmeadow, and I think a little bit from the greater Springfield area, but most of the representation is from different sectors within the town. So the schools, parents, law enforcement,
We've got a
the
religious
public
component.
businesses.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of aspects or groups within the close community. And again, on the website, you've got so much information. You could spend hours on that. Because about what parents should look for, about the teens, about the mock bedroom. And so it's about 7 or 8 years old, I think, right? And but what since you joined first, Chris, what brought you into it? And a little bit about your background, and I guess I failed to mention both of you, Amy and Chris, are really very close friends.
Besties.
You got to be besties, and a lot of it is through the close community, the close coalition that you both joined, and that's how you got to know each other. Is that right?
Well,
A little bit before
A
that.
little bit before? Yeah.
It
Years
was
before
probably a
that,
decade or
probably.
so ago.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 13 or 14 years.
13
when
years
you
ago
first
when I
moved into
moved
town.
here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because you moved in from Salt Lake, you didn't know anybody.
No.
All right.
I went to a tag sale to go find some furniture, and I ran into this.
And you haven't separated
and
since.
we've
Yeah.
been-
Yeah, we met in the driveway looking at roller skates, and that was it.
Yep.
And by the way, I mean, as I got to know you guys through our conversations, you couldn't have had different backgrounds. You couldn't have more different backgrounds because Chris, you grew up in the Church of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake, Utah.
Yeah.
You didn't have much exposure to drugs or alcohol or coffee or anything that's addictive whatsoever.
Yeah, correct.
Amy, you grew up with alcoholism in your family. You were exposed to it throughout your whole life,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Which really was what motivated you to do what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Right? And so, despite your very differences, and again, it couldn't be more opposite, you guys have just come together with a lot of common goals and friendships and all that stuff.
Yep.
So let's get Amy. We talked about your family. What motivated you? What inspired you? What brought you to get so involved with the close community and substance abuse?
Yeah, so I first of all love about Close that we are focused on trying to help other people not go through maybe some of the things that I went through. So the whole idea of being in the community and set an example and trying to build awareness so that other kids growing up maybe don't have to try the things that I tried or experience the things that I experienced and end up in the place that I ended up in. So I did have alcoholism in my family. My mom, my dad, generation upon generation. There was a lot of dysfunction and sadness and confusion and
A lot of turmoil in the
a
house.
lot of hurt related
Yeah.
to that. And I said that I would not be like that. I learned enough from experiencing that I said, well, I'm just gonna kind of like develop my own path and not be like that. And that's not what happened.
Despite you thinking that.
Yeah, despite me
It
thinking
didn't happen that way.
Yeah, I sort of, kind of said, I'm never going to be like that. And I became exactly that. And then, fast forward, I got sober at an early age. I was in my early 20s. And when I had kids, I didn't want them to experience what I experienced. And along with the work that, we do with Close, I was hoping for my own kids, I could help give them some skills and teach them some things so that they didn't have to go on that same path.
How long have you been sober now?
31 years.
And at that time, you said your early 20s, and you just made a decision and that was that? Or were there challenges to getting sober?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of challenges because, first of all, it's hard to get to a point where you can really clearly say, I have a problem, and it is alcohol or it is drugs. I definitely had some problems that I was trying to solve because my life was pretty messy, but it took a while for me to say the main problem is alcohol and drugs. So it took 7-8 years of pain and trouble and consequences for me to say, oh, I know what the main problem is, and if I solve that main problem, maybe the rest of my life will fall into place. So no, it wasn't easy.
And it wasn't an
easy.
overnight.
It was definitely not overnight. But I can say that when I finally had a moment of clarity, I knew the truth. And at that point, when I was willing to accept what the problem was, then it got easier. But part of my story was that I grew up in Alateen. So although I had alcoholism in my family, I also watched my mom get sober, and I learned about Alateen, and I learned about counseling. And those experiences planted seeds so that when I was ready to get help, I knew, oh, there's help for this.
So this didn't come out of the blue. You had some recognition of what
Yeah.
you needed to do.
Yeah.
And you knew from that experience. And your mom, and both your mom and your dad. And living as a teen, you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have two brothers. So there were 3 of us in 3.5 years. So I have an older brother and a younger brother.
Okay, so you're right in the middle.
Yep. And all 3 of us struggled with alcoholism and addiction. All 3 of us.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know why I have a smile on my face when I say that. That's horrible.
Well,
I'm like, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Because you use the word had instead, because now it's gone, so you can smile about that maybe. But, you know, and that's just not easy, because I know in my family we've had a similar situation and how the turmoil and all of that stuff that can happen. And growing up, and then your mom, you said your mom got sober, but then she ended up, she just said, you know what, I'm just going to have one drink.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
Yeah. So my mom was sober for years. She remarried to a sober man, and it was wonderful to see how someone's life could change for the better. And so I got to experience her being sober. But then there was, I think my mom never had the skills to deal with pain. And she did have a moment where she said, screw it, I'm going to have a drink today. She just wanted some relief. So she drank again, and she could never really get sober again. So after picking up that first drink again, I was in my late teens. It was like a 7 or 8 year process of kind of watching her slowly kill herself. Yeah. And that's one for me, especially as a mom. It is one of the reasons why I keep practicing the things that I learned early in recovery, because I don't want that for my kids. I believe if I pick up one drink, that could happen to me. I don't have any fantasies that maybe I could just drink a little bit, or
you already know
anything else a little bit. So
yeah, you mentioned that you were a sober student. And this stems from all of those things that you've experienced and learned. And then what brought you to the close community? I mean, were you there from the beginning of this organization when it started?
I was, and I knew about the close community starting because another dear friend, Shelley Warren, was active in building it. I had gone to some talks at the high school because my kids were like of middle school age at that point, and started to learn some things about alcoholism and addiction through those educational talks. And Close was something that was shared with the parents. So I think Chris joined. The talks, this Close sponsored the talks. So Chris joined and then asked me. I think we had Safe Homes, the Safe Homes Network, and some other things going on. And I said, you know, for me, if I can give back a little bit and maybe help out and do some service, that's important to me, and I feel like Close is a way to do that. And
you've been there for quite a number of years.
A handful.
You lost track a little while ago, I know that, but you were. It's probably from the beginning, I think.
Three, because I think I've done it about 4.
Okay.
It feels like a decade, but if the grant's only been around for 7 years or so, maybe 3-ish.
And Chris, you had initially, you guys were friends, and then you and Amy got involved with this. But your background is a little different than Amy's. You were sort of in a not call it culture shock, but maybe sort of right when you came from Salt Lake. What was your experience upon your arrival here and seeing this is a different? You're not Kansas anymore, kind of a thing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So as part of that faith tradition, we don't drink alcohol, no cigarettes, no drugs, no tea, no coffee. We just anything that could be seen as addictive. So I've literally never even tasted alcohol or coffee ever, never had any. So when we moved here 13 years ago with 3 kids, it was kind of alcohol was not at the parties I attended or any of those things. So, and I'm a very social person, so people would invite us to a party and we'd go, and it was just kind of interesting for me learning to navigate that as a 35-year-old woman, to just be like, oh wow, I've never been around drunk people.
What's all this going on? Yeah.
So it definitely was it was scary. And then thinking about, like my kids when they went to play at a friend's house, there was gonna, it was just, I definitely had a fear around alcohol because I had never seen it practice, people being responsible with it or irresponsible. So it was just kind of like,
just didn't exist.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there.
Yeah. So it definitely, and then when I heard about so I started attending some of these speakers at the school, and I heard about the Safe Homes group, whatever it is. Network, thank you. And this was a group of parents that had agreed to not serve alcohol to minors in their home. And I was like,
wonder, why do we have to have a group that commits to that?
Is there a group that, I get it, okay. But you'd say, why is this?
Doesn't everyone?
Right.
There wouldn't possibly be any parent
we're special
because
we don't give our kids alcohol. Isn't that supposed to be the way? But,
so it kind of floored me, and I was like, well, I promise you, there's no alcohol. Your kids come to my house, there will be no alcohol ever. Yeah. And so that was kind of shocking to me to be like, this is really a thing. And then I wanted to know. I wanted to be able to know other people where I knew that my kids wouldn't be, it never even crossed my mind that people would think to serve my kids alcohol. So So I think for me, getting into, it started with a Safe Homes network. And then a lot of it was me educating myself because there was just so much that I didn't know about. And wanting to also, I guess, be a model for you can have a good time without drinking. We have so much fun together.
Well, we talked about that because after drinking, and a lot of people who drank, and that's where they have their fun, the parties and everything else, and just the thought of saying, how can you still have fun without drinking? Doesn't it take all the fun away?
No.
Isn't it? No?
Well, you remember what you did the night before.
And maybe how you felt the next morning, which is another reason. But, you don't remember how you felt the next morning with a hangover.
Yeah.
And I've never had a hangover.
No, you never had. But in the past, I'm sure you had one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back, I had a ton of fun with alcohol and drugs. I'm just going to say that. There were some fun experiences. Which made it hard to say, oh, this is a problem, until it was clear that there were consequences from what I was doing. And I became a slave to those things. But now, as a sober person, I feel so clear and present with life. And I appreciate that, and I value that, and I'm grateful for it. And sometimes I look at friends who are still doing the things that I did, and I go, how as a parent, you lack sleep anyway. It's so hard to have the energy to keep up with life. How are people still doing it? How do people afford it? But the happiness and the joy for life or lack of that is not a concern. You and I spoke about my recent Grateful Dead shows, and I had a friend who said to me, how do you go to Dead shows sober? Do you still have fun? I dance and have so much fun at every concert I go to. And it's not a concern that I'm not on something.
But it seems to be sometimes it's a strange point of view. People, it's puzzling to other people.
Yeah, it is.
How can you? That's where all my fun comes from.
Yeah, I know, and I get that, and that was one of my questions. It's when I was trying to figure out if I should get sober, how am I going to have fun? How am I going to I'm going to graduate from college, and I'm going to need to drink at my party. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have to drink at my wedding. I'm going to every bit of my life in my future should have alcohol. How am I going to enjoy it? And I don't know. That whole high on life thing is.
And you had to give it a chance. You had to give it a chance, because a lot of people might say no, but once you give it a chance, you've discovered something you didn't think would happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's it.
It's true.
I guess it's a concept that a lot of people will have a hard time with, because it's just a natural thing. Even you thought of yourself.
Yeah.
So,
for anyone who's been around 12-step programs or recovery, there's a saying, I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If you had told me that maybe I would just not be sick and tired anymore, I would be okay. But now to have experienced sobriety, no, it's not just about not being sick and tired. It's about actually having joy and actually experiencing life and not having all those consequences that I had. So it is a little bit of a leap of faith, though. How am I going to do this? And I think that's why in AA it's about like taking one step and staying in the moment one day at a time, because
not overthinking or projecting too far into the future.
Yeah,
just too much. Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Or else you'd never do it.
Right.
It's like any other risk in life.
Overwhelming. And well, see, that's all well said, because I think there's a lot more to that, and I think that's a good message for people to hear that, because it's a common question.
Yeah.
You know. And Chris, I know you, and shifting a little bit, because you're a certified life coach,
Yeah.
and you deal with all kinds of things, mixed faith relationships, marriages, and the stress that could come from that, anxiety, and all these other things that affect people. So you see a lot of things, and a lot of who you speak with in your coaching practice are a lot of the topics you talk about. I know you talk about a lot of mixed faith and all the things that can come from that, but do you find a lot of the issues or substance, alcohol related? And do you find that, if so, taking those things out, does it change people, change relationships?
Yeah, definitely can. I think one of the things I was thinking about was Amy was talking. We all have lots of human beings.
Right.
We have lots of emotions. We've got emotions that feel amazing. We've got love and joy and peace and happiness. And then part of the human experience is to be lonely and to be sad and to be irritated and stressed. And, you know, it's interesting because as we were talking, neither of us have lives that are free from problems. We still, I know it's shocking. I think as a coach, that's one of the big things that I help people with is emotions, because we all, regardless of if you're using or not, we all have emotions that we're dealing with. So as a coach, that's a big thing I help people to learn to process in healthy ways, whether it be, I do, like you mentioned, I do work with people in the mixed faith community, and I also do general life coaching, which so often drugs and alcohol come in because we don't want to feel an emotion. Mm-hmm. Some of them feel terrible. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big thing I do with all my clients, is just helping them learn to allow an emotion so we don't have to go, and because we want to numb out.
You know, I'm going to ask you a question, because there was something on your website that I thought was interesting, and I never thought about this, the difference between a therapist and a life coach, because that's interesting. I said, I never thought about this, but you want to talk a little bit about the difference between those things. Yeah.
So a therapist has gone through extensive training to help people with mental illness, to help people with trauma, to help people with crisis, or like a significant life event, maybe a birth, a death, a big move, a loss of job, like humans go through big things, a kid going off to college or whatever it is. So a therapist is trained to help people they diagnose and help people with those tools, or give people tools to help them with those situations. Mm-hmm. And to basically, when people are not functioning at their base level, you would want to talk to a therapist to help you get up to your base level. And that's kind of different for all of us.
Yep.
So a coach, I work with people that are already functioning at base level. And I do have several clients that work with a therapist and a coach. Mm-hmm. And just to help people go from base level to even better. So if someone's looking to improve a certain area of their life, like a lot of what I do is with relationships, self-esteem is a huge thing. A lot of people come to me just to work on, people say I'm angry all the time, or I'm, and not as, it's not a mental illness issue, but it's just like I feel like I'm always angry or resentful, or, so I work with people on working through those emotions, and just help. I think of a coach as someone, it's kind of like an extra set of eyes. So we get in our problems, all of us, and we just see what's right in front of us. And a coach can help you kind of look at things from a different perspective, not to say like, you should do this or you should say this. It's just like, when you're thinking this thought creates this emotion for you, and then let's say that you're feeling anger. When you're fueled with anger, you're going to show up very differently than you would if you're fueled with compassion or so does that make sense?
No, makes perfect sense. But I read that and I thought that was interesting, so I wanted you to elaborate, which you did great. So on your website it's there. But I think both your backgrounds, as a life coach, as a director of well-being at Mass Mutual, which gosh, how many employees there? 6,000, something like that. I worked there 30 years ago.
Oh, you did,
yeah.
The best
on the Stain
company
Street.
in the world.
Yeah. And I think that also helps with your involvement with the close community. Certainly, your backgrounds, your level of compassion and parenting, of course. And so, back to close community and taking your backgrounds into this. You're very active in this, and what do you guys meet periodically? And if so, what do you do at these meetings? You look at new initiatives or things to just improve awareness about substance abuse?
I mean, I think back to the talks that we went to at the high school, where we're sitting in the audience and as an individual we're learning things about how we can maybe help our kids or ourselves. And then I look at close as the ability to be part of initiatives that help the community. So what we've learned we can kind of spread and build awareness on. So we meet at least quarterly, and we decide as a team what initiatives we want to build based on the data that we're seeing. So we regularly look at data related to substance use and how it's being reduced, or maybe there are gaps where we could do a little bit better. So we do things like lawn sign campaigns, postcard campaigns, talks through the school.
And there's youth involved with this as well.
Yeah,
because
so
that's an important
adults
part of this,
and students.
Well, that's great. And I know, again, and I'll say it again because it's closecommunity.org. That's the website, and it's a wonderful website. What a great program this is. And I was really amazed at this information. It's well organized, the website, and it's got, what I liked is, we don't have my time to talk about it, but I'll just tell, if you go on closecommunity.org, and you'll find there's resources, and under resources is a mock bedroom, which I thought was so enlightening. And it's sort of interactive. You can click on the things and find different information. So that was just an interesting thing.
The first time I saw that mock bedroom in real life, I was blown away.
Horrifying.
And I was scared. Very scared.
Pretty interesting stuff there. So, so again, closecommunity.org. And gosh, we really appreciate all that you guys are doing, and appreciate you being here. And unfortunately we've run out of time. But there's always topics that we come up, and sometimes maybe we want to drill into a few of these things. So if you're ever willing to come back, we could talk more about it. But
for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, Amy Higgins and Chris Rich. And visit closecommunity.org and also chrisrichcoaching.com. All right. Well, thanks everybody. This was really fun. I enjoyed talking to you guys, and keep up the great stuff, man. This is great.
Ditto.
We'll see everybody soon. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.